Hey everybody, Sean here, Boosted Miata, Coolant Reroute. That's what this is all about today, so let's get this started. I'm getting really excited. We're down to the wire, almost ready to stick this motor back in the car, but we got the Coolant Reroute to do first. So let's get that started. Come on. All right, I got everything ready to go. My kit comes from Begi. There are a few kits out there. There's also a do-it-yourself kind of version. My kit consists of really just the spacer, a new housing for the thermostat, some pipe fittings to connect the sensor and the heater hoses, and then of course a block off plate and some screws to kind of put it all together. I've had a scant thermostat that I had lying around to put in because I've got a thermostat in there that's a little too cold at the moment. I want to go back to a stock temperature. I'm going to move the camera up so you can see what's going on here. All right, so I've got the engine up on the hoist, and I'm going to do the install with it on the hoist because I have to be able to get to the back of the engine, and on the engine stand that is impossible. So let me quickly explain what the Coolant Reroute does and why it's important. So on a traditional layout for this engine, Mazda had it in a front-wheel drive car, and it sat like this in the engine bay, with the front of the engine being the side, and the sides of the engine being the front and the back. So when it was originally designed, the coolant flow would still come in through the water pump here, but it would actually exit the engine here, which is now the back of the engine when it sits in the Miata. But when they put it in the Miata, they decided for whatever reason, probably because it's easier to service this way, to put the thermostat in the front of the engine and have the coolant exit the front. The problem here is that the coolant now comes in through the bottom at the water pump here and exits at the front here. So everything is kind of happening in the front of the engine as it sits in the Miata, and the back of the engine is kind of ignored. Now, this isn't to say coolant isn't getting to the back of the engine. It is, because of course coolant systems are pressurized and it does manage to make its way through the engine. It's just not a lot of flow is going through the back of the engine, and as a result the number 4 cylinder can get a little hot, and some people report that the number 4 cylinders get burnt, valves get burnt, rings go bad. There seems to be a lot of bad things that happen at the back of the Miata motor. So the community decided to come up with a solution. Somebody said, hey, why don't we just restore the original coolant flow? And that's what a Coolant Reroute does. It takes the thermostat from the front of the motor and puts it at the back of the motor as it was originally designed. So now you have a hose going from the back of the engine here as it sits in the Miata up to the front into the radiator, and that restores the designed coolant flow, and people report better engine temps and so forth. So is a Coolant Reroute really necessary? For 90% of the Miata owners out there, or probably 99% of the Miata owners out there with stock engines, it's fine. I mean, most of these Miata motors run just fine on the current cooling system. But if you do have a modified motor, and by modified I mean running a turbo, or maybe you have a higher compression engine, maybe you race it and it spends a lot of time on the track, a Coolant Reroute is a good idea because it does give you a lot more coolant toward the back of the engine, a lot cooler coolant at the back of the motor. And people say, if you go on the internet and you look at forums, people say yes, it has improved the cooling performance of their engines. So that's why I'm doing it, because I just want to have a cooler running motor. So let's go ahead and get this started. So Begi sends you some directions, so I'm just going to take a quick scan. So this all looks pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull that off first. That's I believe a 12. Off. Everything's really clean. Alright, that is done. So now, move to the back of the motor. Sensor out. That is off. Now I want to clean this up. I believe I need to remove the stud, so I'm going to use a couple nuts for that. This is not as easy as it should be. Alright, stud is out. Now we got the spacer. Okay, so I'm assuming the spacer is going to go kind of like that. If you look here, if I was to mount this like this, you see the sensor is facing my oil line for my turbo. So there's no way I'm going to connect the sensor end onto that water temp sensor there. That's a problem. So I need to see if I can move that oil line out of the way. So let me start with that. All right, I think I'm getting there. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that I have to thread this nipple for my heater hose in here, right? So what I'm trying to do is make sure that I have the orientation correct for the heater hose, and you can see if I was to install it on like that, you can see that this is the correct orientation. So I'm happy about that. I'm sure it's in the instructions, but I kind of like to figure this stuff out on my own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to permanently affix this right now. I'm going to put some Teflon tape on here. Now I need to install the nipple for the heater hose. This is kind of nice. This is nicely engineered, so this just fits nice and snug in there. So that's cool. I like that. So there's no guesswork. It just goes right in. So that's the new, how the whole system will look sitting on the back of the engine. Alright everybody, so the coolant reroute is installed right here. It was pretty straightforward, pretty easy, kind of messy because you've got this this plate, well, this spacer actually, where everything goes into, and then you have to put this housing on top of that, and the spacer doesn't have holes. It only has like slots cut out in it, and you got to kind of hold it. Then if you're using some kind of sealant like I was, it just gets everywhere. It was kind of messy. I wasn't happy about that. For $100, what I'd like to see Begi do is create a whole unit, like create a whole housing unit that would work best, I think. So let me show you what I had to do here real quick. So this condenser here, this is a coil condenser, needed to be relocated. It was originally down here, and you can see the location of the temperature sensor is blocking that. So I had to relocate it there. And I have the new hose on, so it looks like my hose routing is going to basically go around like here and up to the radiator here. But I have to finalize that when I get it in the car. I just want to make sure I have it attached at the rear here. Maintenance on this is going to be difficult because I can just look at this and I realize when I look inside the engine bay, there isn't a whole lot of space back here. So if I ever have to change this thermostat or do anything, fix a leak or anything back here, change the hose, it's going to be difficult to say the least. Alrighty, I think that is going to do it for today. We are done with the coolant reroute. Up next is putting the motor back in the car, and I can't wait. That'll be my next video, hopefully happening very, very soon. So make sure you subscribe if you want to see that video. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you have any comments or questions or concerns, just leave me a comment down below. I'd love to read what you have to say. In the meantime, guys, I really, really appreciate you checking out my video. And if you like it, why don't you go ahead and give me a like? That would be awesome. In the meantime, I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bringing moving on now. 7 psi, 8 psi, hold it. I've got a problem here. I can't hold it. She's breaking up.